Welcome back to the news today. This is the Daily Debate. On Monday, U.S. President Barack Obama rejected the Israeli Prime Minister's call for Iran to recognize the State of Israel as part of a final nuclear deal. Obama said the demand is to completely transform the nature of the Iranian regime and is a fundamental misjudgment by the Israeli Prime Minister. Netanyahu has, of course, in the past demanded the Palestinian Authority as well recognize Israel as a Jewish state as a precondition for a peace deal. So tonight we'll try to understand if there is any diplomatic necessity in those recognition demands and a lot more of the broader picture. With me is Daneil Shek, former Israeli ambassador to France. Good evening, Ambassador
Hi, good
Shek.
evening.
And Marc Zell, co-chair of Republicans Abroad Israel.
Good evening.
Good evening. So let's just start with Obama's reaction to Netanyahu. Since then, we've seen also the Israeli Minister Yuval Steinitz come out back against Obama. Was it reasonable at all for Netanyahu to ask this to be included in an Iranian nuclear deal?
Look, one of the things that Netanyahu made very clear when he went to Congress is that this is not just about a nuclear weapon. I mean, there's a geopolitical reality that that's being created by this Iranian regime. I mean, they're using their potential to break out and become a nuclear state in order to intimidate their immediate adjacent neighboring states, intimidate us. But they're also undermining the legitimacy and the stability of regimes around the region, all around Israel.
But that specific demand to recognize Israel
well, it's
will not necessarily solve the Middle East chaos.
No, it will not solve it. But it's intended to be a kind of a litmus test for Iran's sincerity in entering into these negotiations. If Iran really is serious about developing a peaceful nuclear program, which I find completely incredible, then they ought to be willing to back off their attempt to project their power across the region, and not only to threaten Israel, but most of the longstanding Arab regimes in the area. Now, so when Netanyahu says recognize Israel, he's really saying back off your Holocaust denial, back off your threats to annihilate Israel and wipe it out as some kind of Zionist vermin, to use the
Iranian term.
The Iranian terminology, and join the family of nations. You want to be peaceful? Let's have peace. Or we don't have to agree on everything, but at least not try to destroy everybody.
Ambassador Shek, from all of your experience in diplomacy, is this diplomatically sound, so to speak? Is it a reasonable request?
I'm not sure that that's the real issue. You know, you can do all sorts of creative things in diplomacy which have never been tested before. It's just, I think the question is elsewhere. And just to set the record straight, I'm not crazy about this agreement. I think it could improve, and I hope it will improve. I don't think it will ever be perfect, but I think it can still improve. And B, I would love Iran to recognize Israel and to make peace with us. Having said that, it's a bit strange that after not 6 months of negotiation or 2 years of negotiations, this is a process that has been going on for 13 or 14 years, where Israel has entrusted the international community led by the United States and the P5+1, as they are known, in negotiating a deal with Iran, to suddenly come up with a new issue which was never part of it, was never mentioned. The recognition of Israel was not the issue. On the contrary, the whole effort, the whole diplomatic effort, and may I add, success of Israeli diplomacy was to un-Israelize the problem and to transform it into an international issue, which it has become. And now suddenly to center everything again around Israel seems to be a diplomatic mistake. It's not a question of if it's doable or is it done. It's just, I don't think it's the right thing to do.
Look, in my view, Israel is not the central issue. And I think you implied that in your remarks, Ambassador. I mean, Israel is a tripwire. Okay, to test Iranian credibility about
It's a bit late to test Iranian credibility at the very end of a process that was started 14 years ago.
No, but wait a minute.
Nobody thinks that they're terribly credible.
Well, I'm glad you said that.
No, but it's known. But that was never the test for their credibility.
13 years ago, Ambassador, you did not have a president of the United States that was rushing almost headlong toward an agreement, so-called agreement. There is no agreement. Let's make that clear right now.
There is no agreement. agreement
There is
yet.
no agreement. And they can't even agree, the two sides to it can't even agree in describing whatever it is that they didn't agree to.
So that's why I said the negotiation needs to be continued, but I just don't think that introducing the issue of recognition of Israel is the right test for this.
Surely,
it's
Mark,
just not the right thing.
Netanyahu, if we're just speaking
Unless you
about
want it to fail, you want to make sure that it fails, which might be the idea behind Prime Minister Netanyahu's mind. It could be. I'm not saying it's illegitimate, but that may be the real idea.
If the deal is headed towards the kind of agreement that we fear it is, that the Republicans in Congress feel, many Democrats feel in the United States, and many people around the world feel that this agreement, if it ever comes to be, is just not going to answer the questions. And it's going to create more problems.
And if they do recognize Israel, would that suddenly transform the deal into a good
not.
one? Of course not. So that's the whole thing.
No, it's
just not part of
Netanyahu's reasoning, do you think?
I think that Netanyahu is trying to do is to. And by the way, Netanyahu is almost single-handedly responsible for convincing the international community to apply the sanction regime in the first place. And you said it.
I agree.
Israeli diplomacy
but
led primarily by him.
If you make the international community responsible for this negotiation, which was the right thing to do because Israel on its own had no tools to deal with this issue, then of course there's a price to pay. You don't call all the shots. You have to compromise to some degree.
Israel cannot possibly call the shots. We're a pipsqueak.
I know.
But this little pipsqueak is kind of wagging the world, because of the arguments.
It's done quite a lot of wagging so far.
The coherent arguments of the Prime Minister of Israel changed the tenor of this debate. First of all, in Washington and around the world. Now, by focusing the world on the dangers to the one country that the Iranian nuclear program constitutes an existential threat, causes the world to focus on the weakness of this deal. I don't believe that Netanyahu is serious about requiring the world to make Israeli recognition a tenet of this agreement. It cannot be. But what it is doing is shaking the world into waking up to the reality of the Iranian position. You yourself said these negotiations have been going on for 13 years, and the Iranians have skillfully avoided any kind of deal over this time, all the while progressing their nuclear program.
Mark, just today, who I mentioned before, Israeli Minister Yuval Steinitz said, well, to Obama, saying that he has Israel back, so to speak, that no backing will really help if we see a nuclear Iran. So if that's the case, which is clearly Israel's position, that there cannot be a nuclear Iran no matter what does it help to have recognition of Israel?
Again,
what difference will it make in the bigger picture?
I think the recognition of Israel is a tripwire. It's a test. It's a way of focusing the attention of the world on the dangers of this agreement. It is not the essence of this agreement.
And is Netanyahu not just sort of driving Obama and Zarif and Iran closer together by requests that are sort of clearly not going to happen?
I don't want to interrupt the ambassador.
Since demanding, let's say, not unreasonable, but probably unrealistic things from counterparts in our various negotiations is become sort of a strategy, because I could say about the same concerning the demand to recognize Israel as a Jewish state by Abu Mazen, which I, for different reasons, completely don't think is a crucial part of any future negotiation unless it is somewhere in the end. I just don't think that as an Israeli it's important to be recognized by a Palestinian. My identity is defined by myself and not by my counterparts or enemies. But that also has sort of done the job for Netanyahu, because it for the moment has rendered the negotiation.
Preserved a non-negotiation status.
Yes, it has made the negotiations impossible.
And some people that I don't want to get into a debate with you about the Palestinian negotiations.
No, it's not the issue. I was just making a certain comparison.
It's a tactic. Yes. It is a tactic, and no one's denying that it's a tactic, and it's an important tactic. Just as in the case of the Palestinian negotiations, the Prime Minister was able to focus the attention principally of us here in Israel about the dangers of any such agreement at this point in time, given the realities of the Middle East. So the injection of Israel into the nuclear negotiations with Iran has focused and makes clear that there are real risks here, and the ones that are going to, if we're wrong, if the world is wrong, if Obama is wrong. By the way, he has, from the very beginning of his presidency, not changed his position on this. His policy, right from the time he ran for president in 2008, was, I'm going to engage Iran. This president has a very naive view about how the world works, and particularly the Middle East works, and he's continuing to pursue that with a vengeance now that he's in a lame duck situation.
We do have to say, we spoke about 13, 14 years. They were not entirely Obama years. There were other presidents, and they could not even impose a sanction regime. The sanction regime.
They didn't try.
Well, they didn't try. Then what was the point? The whole idea. I mean, it was one of the great successes.
That's the Israeli success.
This was not a democratic president, though.
It came with a democratic president. So I mean, there's not that I'm saying that is crucial. I just think that it's
not a partisan issue.
It's a bit. I don't know what adjective exactly to use, but disingenuous. To blame President Obama, who I don't have any particular liking or disliking for him or any other president, but to accuse him that he has been irresponsible in this, while he has in fact achieved the great breakthrough in putting pressure on Iran a few years ago with the imposition of the sanction regime. Now, a sanction regime has a purpose. It's not a purpose in itself. It has a different target, and that is to put pressure and to get your sanctioned entity to bend and to go back on certain, to get back on certain issues that they were saying. And that pressure has worked. I certainly think that it would have been far better if the sanctions had been imposed 10 years earlier, and if they had been stronger. I think that we would be in a different position. But that, I must say, is not President Obama's fault.
Oh, well, here's where I beg to differ with you. The reason Obama got the Iran has come to the table in this latest round. Iran has been to the table a few times. This is not the first time.
No, it's ongoing.
It's the latest time. It's primarily because of the sanctions. These are sanctions that Israel and the Israeli Prime Minister have been urging the world to adopt
but he couldn't get them
years.
Done until an American president took the reins in his hands and did so. By the way, I must give credit to the European partners to this, because the French, who I know quite well, were those who were maybe, and still have, maybe the strongest and most...
they were the sort of hardliners amongst the Europeans. Yes, they are the hardliners,
and it's not a political decision for them. They have experts, they have people who have been dealing with this for years, and they have no illusions about the Iranians, and they have nothing romantic about this future deal. They are very, very realistic about this.
And they're still worried about it.
And they're still worried, absolutely.
And they're worried about this president's
So am I. I'm worried too.
Intransigence and moving towards a deal.
It's not that I'm defending this deal. I don't think it's a great deal. I just think it's not a great idea, not a useful one, to introduce this political issue of recognizing or not recognizing Israel. I don't think we're going to make peace with Iran in the foreseeable future.
Well, moving beyond that, let's look for a moment at the aftermath of the framework announced, because we've seen very interesting comments every day. Of course, it was predictable that each side would have to go home and sell it as a win for their domestic audience. But beyond that, we see sort of differing versions from Zarif, from Obama, and now reports that the French fact sheet is also different. What do you make of everybody's sort of different versions of the guidelines?
If I had to give you a 10-second answer, the clock were ticking for the end of this debate, I'd say I don't think there will be a deal in the foreseeable future.
That this is a sign of it?
Yes, I think that the deal is not done, and that the pressure was on the participants, and maybe particularly on President Obama, to show something at the deadline. But that something seems to be shaky, and I don't know how, with the different versions on some really crucial issues being as they are. Of course, maybe in the coming 2 or 3 months they will be worked out, but I think that we're still not there.
Well, first of all, I want to agree with you, Daneil, on this.
Oh.
I think.
Are you sure?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not the first time that we agree.
No, it is not, and I think that Daneil's perfectly correct in saying There is no deal. There's a lot of spin. The pressure was on this, and the president, and this is, I'm a lawyer, and what I do for a living is negotiate. And one of the things you know in negotiations, I mean, you don't put yourself against an artificial deadline. And if you got a deadline and you can't reach agreement, you walk. You walk away. You don't sit there and wait till the other side squeezes you for more concessions. That's exactly what happened here.
It seems like all of these self-imposed, we've had deadlines, we have red lines, all of these self-imposed lines have just, at least, for Obama, they haven't worked out too well.
In this region,
Yes.
I remind you that the Oslo process was supposed to be over in '98.
Supposed to be,
and deadlines.
Well, I don't want to go back to Palestinian issues, but I'm talking about the Syrian red line. The issue today with the Iranians is the sanctions, and they're telling you it's going to have
Mark,
to go off, and that's just not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. You'll be back to tell us why. Marc Zell, Ambassador Shek, thanks very much. We'll be back in just 2 minutes. Don't go anywhere.